Are we live?
Yes, it says we are live.
Ooh, okay. Hello, everyone who is here. We are so excited to have you for the second live show. My name is Autumn from Chapter Maliumkin. I am Apache, and we have Michelle. Michelle, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello, Hihani Washte. My name is Michelle, and so here we are on our second live show ever of OMG, She's Indigenous, and today we are going to be reading, or we read, finished, watched, just went through some stuff with Fire Song, the movie, and the book.
Mistakes were made, everybody. Mistakes were made. But
And I
that's
want my
okay.
fucking money back.
It's okay. It's okay because we watched and read it for you, so you do not have to. Because
And I don't recommend doing it. Okay.
Oh, where should we start, Michelle? Should we start with the movie?
Yeah, we're gonna start with the movie. I had to buy this because it was on Amazon Prime at the time, and somebody said something about how it had been on Netflix last year, and I did not see that. I looked it up because Wolf, the company, is like it has they have a lot of LGBTQIAP videos on Netflix, and so I was like, oh, that would have been cool if it was on Netflix. But no, I paid $16 for this, and I want it back.
I want to say you at least enjoyed the book and the movie a lot more than me, because I think I messaged you and was like, I think even on video chat, I was like, bruh, I want to light this on fire. Like, what is this even? Like, do I 1-star? Do I 2-star this?
Because you started watching it before I did. So to give a synopsis on this, we'll give a synopsis because otherwise you have no idea what the F is going on. So Shane is still reeling from the suicide of his kid sister Destiny. How could he have missed the fact that she was so sad? The person he most wants to turn to for comfort is his friend David, but it's difficult when they have to keep their relationship hidden from everyone on the res. With his grieving mother unable to cope with the tragedy, Shane realizes that his dream of going away to university is threatened. His yearning for a better life is further thwarted when David refuses to leave for the city. A powerful story about love, grief, and moving on, Fire Song deftly navigates the struggles of two Indigenous gay teenagers trying to find their place in the world. And at first, I picked this because I was like, oh, it's a book. And then I realized that it was actually an adaptation of a film of the same name, and the fact that I was like, oh, we can watch the movie and read the book. So yeah.
Drew, the reason why, okay, so I should have said this at the beginning of the video. I know Michelle actually made a post. So for those of you who are watching and wondering why I'm not on camera, basically, to make a really long story short, a lot of stuff happened and my spaces got compromised and I no longer felt safe. And so as a way of protecting myself to still go through with the live show, I am just speaking. So I'm not revealing my face. I mean, Michelle has, like, in chat before, like, the live and whatnot, we've been chatting face to face and whatnot. But as of right now, I do not feel comfortable with showing my face because someone in the book community has really violated my boundaries.
Super violated. Like, I want to punch somebody.
But I'm going to give the content and trigger warnings for this in case anyone who hasn't read this or hasn't watched this. And let me just clarify, the movie does not even show half of these trigger warnings. But when you read the book, like, it's trigger warnings left and right. So
it's not rated, so...
So, content and trigger warnings for loss of a loved one, suicide, grief, depression, cheating, homophobia, violence and gun violence, drugs, drug dealing, underage drinking, mentions actually on-page rape, both in the movie and in the book, there are acts of pedophilia, mentions of pedophilia, there is fat phobia, there's bullying, there is a brief mention of police brutality and death by police brutality mentioned very briefly. There is actually a death, and then there's also a lot of misandry.
And there's also you also see someone who had committed suicide, like their full body
Oh,
hanging
yep.
in the movie. So
Movie like
look out for that.
shows a
That's
full hanging of,
not great.
yeah, it's, and there's like no context, like there's no trigger warnings or content warnings before the movie or even before the book. Like it's a lot of stuff, and I'll be honest, like some of those parts were like really hard to like get through. Like even watching the movie, I'm like, really? This is really happening? Like this is what we want to go for? Um, I'm gonna also go out on a limb. I've been going back and forth on this trigger warning, and I haven't really decided. And Michelle, you can also say something as well on if you feel like it's stated and whatnot. But I also want to say gaslighting, because in
Yeah,
the book, David and Tara, both the love interests to the main character Shane, both really gaslight him for wanting to leave the reservation, to further his education, to better himself. And everyone around him, but most importantly, from like David and Tara, really light a fire under him. Like, well, you can't just leave, and all kinds of stuff. So if any of that stuff is triggering to you, like definitely be aware going into it. If you do decide to read this book, or if you have read this book, then you probably know what we're talking about.
because some people have triggers that we are not aware of, and so we just
Mm-hmm.
want to give a well-rounded disclaimer trigger for everybody that has difficulties with things like this. Because I mean, there's some big ones, but there's also some small ones that other people, that might be their big thing, and then the other thing is like their small things. So
Mm-hmm.
just want to be clear on that. So thoughts on the movie. This was directed by Adam, I think directed but not produced by Adam Garnett Jones, who is also
Mm-hmm.
the author of this book. And then I believe the director is I don't know who the director is. I should say on here. Oh, the production. Oh no.
Yeah, I believe Adam was the director of
Yeah.
all of it. Like from what I'm aware of, like not just the producer but also the director of it all. Um One thing you also need to understand is this is a movie to book adaptation. This is not a book to movie adaptation. There's a huge difference. So everything you see in the movie, there are like some bits and pieces in the movie, but and Michelle, like you can clarify on this, but for me, they're two totally separate things. It was like watching one thing and then reading something entirely
It
different.
was like night and day. It was redonkulous. Like some of the like dialogue is the same, but it feels so short. Like I feel like there was like not much acting was going on here. Just let's just say.
Dialogue. What dialogue in the movie? You barely get any dialogue in the movie.
See, this is why I gave it more credit than you did, because I'm so this thing, it just makes me so mad.
I mean, let's just be honest, because the movie barely has any dialogue, and when you get actual scenes, that really big important scenes, like you maybe get 3 to 5 lines of dialogue, and then that's it.
And it feels very rushed.
It feels very rushed. There was, like, even in the book, like we get more dialogue, but there's a scene where you have the youth of the indigenous kids on the reservation sitting down for a suicide prevention group. Hi, Brody. And they're all sitting down, and in the book they have a more detailed discussion, but in the movie you barely get any dialogue. You barely see any of that dialogue. And it's really important, because as much as I despise like the side character of Kyle, Kyle brings up a very important point of, well, people only notice and care about people when something bad happens to them, whether it's suicide or because of police brutality or a homicide, or like any other thing. Like people only really care and celebrate their life until they're gone, until it's too late. And you see more of that in the book than you do in the movie. And I feel like they had such a great opportunity to actually open that floor up. And instead, they barely gave us any of the dialogue that we see in the book. And you don't even see the fight scene. You don't even see how that's triggering for Shane in that scene. And that, like, there's also another point, like, near the end of the movie where it's David, Shane, Evie, and then Jackie. Jackie is Shane's mom, and then Evie is, I believe, David's grandmother.
Yeah, David's grandma.
And they all sit down, and it's basically them accepting David and Shane for being who they are, being two-spirited, being in a relationship together. And in the book, it was fantastic. Like, I really appreciated that scene because even though you don't have to agree with it, you can still love the people and still want the best for them. And I was so pissed in the movie because Evie has amazing dialogue in that whole entire part, and we don't see any of it.
Yeah,
Like,
because
there's.
in the book, she's supposed to be like the kooky grandma that believes in everything, but she's still traditional, but she's also kooky.
Mhm.
But like in the movie, she's not kooky. She's just like that one grandma that is kind of mean to you and you kind of feel bad for her, and she's still spiritual and she believes in, she's very traditional, but like none of that was like it, like I said, night and freaking day. So like it opens up in the water because in the book, it actually talks about, Shane talks about his grief and how he feels and how it's like the waterfalls crashing and like he goes to this place called the Drift. And that was a very real thing. Like that's why this book and the movie really upset me personally because we were actually not sure if we were still going to do this because if you didn't know, if you're not following me, but you're following Autumn, back in May, my brother committed suicide. And so she was kind of concerned if this book was going to be something that I should be reading, if I should be consuming this all this information because I'm going through this. And I found it to be very, in a way, therapeutic, but also in a way I was upset by the way I read this first before watching this, and I think it would have been a totally different experience if I had watched this and then read this. I'd still probably be angry, but so it opens up on the water, and if you didn't know, I studied journalism for a little while when I was in college before, like in between high school and college. And so I learned a lot about like B-roll and wide and tight shots and a lot of the things that are used in photography and in video that are important. And I didn't know anything about filmmaking, but just watching this movie, I even made a few points where I was like, they completely dropped the ball on the things that they could have used in the movie that were talked about in the book. Like, it opens up on the water and it's like I thought they were going to go back to the water at some point with the drift and that part was not used. So like that was frustrating.
They had so many opportunities to like really do something with how we never really get to see how like a suicide impacts families after it's done. We never really get to see that. So in the book when Shane like talks about how he feels and feels like he can't really talk about how he's feeling to anyone because they're so wrapped up in their own
On the why,
issues.
because everybody wants to talk about it. Like everyone wants to talk about why, and that was a big thing for when I was going through my grief. But like I was going through the entire week of the event happening to the funeral happening, and you don't see any of that in the book. You don't see like the mother making arrangements or the mother having to go get like if the tribe does like retributions for it. Like my tribe only gives out like a certain amount of money, and so you have to use that money for like the funeral and like the food and things like that. And so you don't see any of that, and that was frustrating. You just see Shane like getting ready in like a shirt that's too tight or something like that.
I mean, to be fair, both in the book and in the movie when Shane goes to like seek work from Janice, when she ends up catching that he stole like two couple mail sheets or whatever. Um, Janice was like, the church or whatever picked up a retribution for you, and then basically hands him a check. Like that's it. Like you don't really see anything else. It's just here's a check.
Yeah.
And that's so disappointing because with a lot of these things, like once again going back to like that whole circle of where like community is so important and having like people your peers around you to talk about these things, it's so important to show like how a community can really rally behind people, and to like not show that at all. Like they had so many opportunities with various of things, and the one thing I think I mentioned this to you, Michelle, a lot was they really showed their budget with the movie, because I got more from the book than the movie, because they had so many opportunities with showing the grief and the depression. They could have really opened the floor up with the whole scene with the youth group, and the suicide, like opening that discussion, and they didn't do it. They could have opened it up to really show how the community can come and stand behind a family who is suffering a great loss and whatnot. I've seen that. I talk about this all the time. I'm from a small town and we've had some really major deaths, and I have watched people who don't get along at all. I have watched other school districts come together and rally behind us for those losses, and have rallied behind the families of those who have
And you don't
lost.
see any of that
Like,
in the movie. Like when my brother died, it was like it was almost like like overwhelming. Like there was family coming out of the woodwork that was asking how they could help.
mhm,
There were like that day, just that day, what like people were calling my auntie and trying to talk to her. People were calling me, like messaging me, texting me. Like there was just overwhelming sense of like, oh my god, are you okay, kind of a thing. But like you don't see that in the book, you don't see that in the movie, and you like it just felt like nobody gave a shit after a certain amount of time, and that's like why the point that Kyle made was important, even though we hate Kyle. It was just
mhm.
it was important that he was like, why did no one say anything while they were still alive?
Yeah. So many missed opportunities. So many missed
And some of
opportunities.
that stuff you could just do like even for free. Like the medium, the wide, and the tight shots, some of them were good, but some of them were also terrible because there's no explanation for some of the things and some of the reasons why certain characters do certain things. Like personally, I thought the casting, like some of the casting was really great. But for me, I think the one that was like threw me off the most was probably Debbie's casting, because she's like supposed to be this like older gruff auntie, and she looked like one of those like 30 something aunties.
Yeah. And can we just also take a moment and this is never even talked about in the book. Like so in the book, you get a mention of where Shane has like scratches on his arm from where his mom like dug her nails into his arm. But in the movie, the person who plays Shane, on both sides of his arms, higher up, like just below his shoulders, have self harm cuts. It's never addressed. It's basically a giant elephant in the room. And as someone who has self harm in the past and still has like the scarring on their arm, the number one thing, like I kept thinking the entire time is like, okay, are we not going to address why Shane has these cuts on his arm? Like, are we really not going to address that? And in the book, like, it's never even hinted, it's never even talked about that Shane has thought about like self harm, never considered like being on that verge between self harming and possibly going further into the suicide. It's never discussed, it's never talked about. But yet in the movie, Shane's character has self-harm scars. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's part of the actual actor's story or if they specifically wanted Shane to portray that. But
Because
like,
they look 100% real. Like, I don't
yeah.
know if that was just the actor himself that had gone through that, or if it was a design choice, but
It
like that's kind of what I personally wondered as well. And then uh what about Tara? We were talking about this too with Tara and Destiny and their casting, which
oh,
Tara had been in the book. Tara had been described as a plus size character, and Destiny, I think, what was it you said that she was sort of like
Ashley
on the plus
was the
size, but
Ashley was the plus size character, and then Tara was shown as being like the stereotypical pretty indigenous girl, and I didn't really like that. And another thing that you're going to notice is in the book, Tara is extremely self-centered and does a lot of misandry towards Shane. Well, Shane needs to be tougher and act more like a man and suck it up and needs to start pulling his weight in a relationship that he mentally wasn't even there. And another thing, so in the movie, like there's a scene where Shane and Tara are about to do the deed. They're about to have intercourse for the first time. And in the book, she actually rapes him. So she's like, "Well, do you want to have sex?" And he's like, yeah, sure, okay."
I guess
That's that's not a yes or no. Like one of my biggest things is consent is key. And I don't talk about it a lot. I mentioned it with Shell, and I mentioned it in one or two reviews of books, but I am a survivor of rape. And that, reading that, and how she was just like constantly going at his pants, and it's never shown, it's made in the movie to seem like, oh, they're just two teenagers having fun. No, because, yeah, sure, I guess.
because
That's not yes or no.
in the book there is a scene like when they're supposed to be going through this together. He talks about how he feels like this is too private, it's too much to be doing this, whereas in the movie they just make it seem like they're like giggling, and I'm just like, no, it's completely different in the book than it is in the movie. And I did not like that, because he even talks about like he almost goes in the drift, but like, and then
Like,
David catches them, even though there's another scene in the beginning where
oh,
he and Tara are making out, and then David kind of sees them, and she yells at him. So I don't know,
it,
because they have sex in like a completely different place. In this one, they're having sex in that one
yeah,
shed place, and
the
then
abandoned house, I think it was, like an abandoned house or
yeah,
something.
okay. In the book, they're having it in her room, and then in the movie, I mean, and then in the book, they're having it in the abandoned shed place. It's just
Yeah. No, so in the movie, it's in like the abandoned shed house, but like in the book, they're in her bedroom because she lures Shane over with her dad being uh
pedophilic.
yeah, being very pedophilic towards her again. And that's like one of like the hugest things. Another thing that like you really get a vibe for it in the book, but not really in the movie. Tara is very much of, oh, well, we're gonna have sex. Like very much like, let's have sex. Let's do it. Let's have intercourse. Very much of throwing herself, deluding herself like there's an actual relationship between her and Shane. But during the entire book, even you get it in like bits and pieces in the movie, but it's not as clear as in the book. Like in the book, you can tell Shane does not like this. He's like, I'm really uncomfortable. I don't know what to do. I'm not getting enough time to really think about this. Um, Another reason why I mentioned the trigger warning and content warning for gaslighting is because David constantly like keeps Shane in the closet and is like, well, if you tell her about us, then we can't be together. If people find out, we can't be together. Basically, gaslighting Shane about their relationship.
Almost every time Shane tries to touch him, he like even in public or like even in private, he just like
Hmm.
shrugged him off. Um, oof.
Yeah. And so Shane's kind of forced into a position where everyone thinks him and Tara together because she's constantly putting themselves in situations where people are seeing them as a couple,
And
and he
she
doesn't
invites
really feel that
herself
way.
to Toronto to go with him.
Hmm. She literally basically announces to like the people they hang out with, "Oh yeah, well I'm going to Toronto with him." It's never they never have a discussion. Like Shane is never able to like really voice like, "Well, why would you say that? Why would you tell that to them? We never talked about this. We never agreed to this." But both in the book and in the movie, before that even happens, Shane ends up giving David a guide to Toronto because Shane wants to go to Toronto to further his education, get better so that way when he comes back to the res, he can do better for on the reservation and do better for his family. And the whole entire relationship, it's just a giant mess. And the movie does not portray the reality of things the way the book does.
Yeah. And then so the I me personally, I really did not like the way that Shane is depicted in both the movie and in the book because they're completely night and day. In this, he is seen as like a lot of people showed like thought that he was, a douche, he was inconsiderate, whereas he's suffering from extreme grief from his sister killing herself. And in this, he is depicted as an asshole. And it's just like
It's not
completely,
accurate at all.
it's not accurate because he's going through some terrible grief about his sister, about his place in the world, and the things that he wants for him and himself,
Hmm.
and what everybody else wants from him because his uncle wants him to take care of his mom. Like everybody thinks that he should stay to take care of his mom, and he's the only one that's like, no, I want to go so I can get educated, so I can change this place, instead of everyone saying, oh, just stay because you can make a difference now. And then that in the way that David wants him to stay and Tara wants to go with him, and
It's it's a mess. And that's the thing. So, as I was reading the book, I told this to you, Michelle. Like I read a lot of reviews of people who had read this. Like I think like when it came out and whatnot, and how they were saying, "Oh, Shane's so inconsiderate. Shane's this terrible person. He's painted in such a light." I'm like, as I'm reading this book, I'm like, I don't know what y'all are talking about because Shane is basically being forced into a tiny little box. It's such a tiny box. He can't express how he's feeling. He can't be open about his relationship with his boyfriend. He can't freaking tell the girl who basically raped him, keeps putting him in these freaking positions where he does not feel comfortable at all, where he is so messed up and conflicted, and he's being pushed into a rock and a hard place. Not even that, like a small tiny crevice. Like his mom's not doing anything. His
his
uncle's
mom is
adding pressure.
unbelievably depressed.
Like Shane isn't if anything, Shane is traumatized. Shane is so badly traumatized and is in needing of someone to actually sit down and be like, "What can I do for you? How can I alleviate the weight that is on your shoulders right now? Tell me the thoughts that you have been having." He needs someone to sit down, not ask about relationships, not ask about like all that. Just actually genuinely sit down, be like, how can I help you? What can I do to take the weight off? Because even though you're doing all these things, I know that can't be the truth. You're probably suffering from a great weight. What can I do to help you? What can I
And,
do to take some of the stress off?
and then there's the way that Tara is represented book via movie. Like in the
Mm,
book, I personally she is a rapist, she is a gaslighter, she's manipulative, she's abusive.
Hmm.
But in the movie, she's a victim.
She's a victim. She's made very innocent.
Like all of this is just happening to her, and
And
nothing
then
bad is happening to him because
can
he's
we
an
also
asshole.
take a moment to like on the topic of Tara? So in the book, so we never see like Tara writing the poems and whatnot. So basically when she discovers that Shane and David are in a relationship with each other, she she basically writes a poem. She writes a poem and that's it. Her point of view is just cut off in the book. However, in the movie, we actually see the whole sexual assault scene. So there is content trigger warnings for sexual assault in the movie. We see the way Kyle is basically trying to act as like he's the good guy and lures Tara into a false sense of security, and it basically takes off from there. She's basically so heavily intoxicated that she can't realize what's actually happening. And then it takes off from there.
Yes, and she also writes some very disturbing poems in this
Mm-hmm.
in the book. She has like which I was kind of mad at that I didn't see in the book in the movie, but in the book she is seen to have this notebook that she carries around with her everywhere, and she writes stuff in it. She writes poems in it and things like that, and she writes some very disturbing poems. There's a part where Shane says, "Well, I don't want to knock you up and like leave you here, and I don't want to get stuck here." And she writes a whole poem about the possible baby that they might have, and it's disturbing. And then she writes about her first time with Shane, and the whole thing is so disturbing. And you don't see her having a notebook in the movie, but she has a notebook in the book.
On that note, like on the topic of like the whole pregnancy thing, like just in general, the fact that he is genuinely concerned. They're young. Okay, so they are young.
They're
And
17, 18 years old.
yeah, that's the one thing like I don't think is talked about often enough is teen pregnancy and how that changes and affects everything. I mean, I know there's like reality TV shows and stuff out there, but like the thing that bothers me is it's never talked about how when people be like, "Oh, well, it's not the worst thing." Like that literally happens in this book. It's he's genuinely expressing his concern about if she were to get pregnant, not even just the fact of like he's in the closet, he can't talk to her about his boyfriend. And he's not even thinking about that. He just wants to further his education and is trying to help keep his family above water. And she's like, "Well, if I was pregnant, it's not the worst thing in the world." Well, for him, that might be a catastrophe. That might be something that just might wreck his entire ship. Like any plans that he's tried to establish, that might just get destroyed. And he's genuinely expressing concerns. Like, I don't want to go off and leave you here to like raise the child by yourself. I don't want to get you knocked up because we're so young. Like all that. He expresses that. And she's like, "Well, it's not the worst thing that could happen."
Yeah, and it's terrible. And so like the way that she's portrayed book via movie, and then also after the thing that happens with her and Kyle, she commits suicide in the movie, and Shane is the one that discovers her body.
Hmm.
In the movie, just trigger warning, graphic, her whole entire body is shown in the movie.
Yeah.
And that was extremely disturbing for me because that was how my brother committed suicide. He was found, his other brothers and their family tried to resuscitate him and bring him back. And so to see that full force in the movie was like, I just had to actually pause. I paused for like a good 10 minutes. I was like, wow, do I even want to keep going? Because this is going to get worse. Like, this is going to gradually get worse at some point. And so, like, it just gives you no preparation at all. And it was extremely jarring for me
Yeah.
personally. So that was a lot. So to see her as like in this book where she's a rapist and she's terrible to Shane, and then boom, she kills herself, and then to see it full-fledged force in the movie was like, why they could have done so much. Like the amount of money that they paid for the scene to show her body versus like making editorial changes to the actual movie, like I feel like they could have saved some money there, because that was ridiculous, and I don't think that it should have ever been shown. I don't agree with that.
Yeah, oh, it's a lot of oof. And once again, I'm just gonna say it again. Like, if any of the stuff that I mentioned earlier with the content and trigger warnings is triggering for you, know that
Don't.
this
Just
is
don't
on
watch it.
page.
Don't
This is
read
like
it.
on page content and trigger warnings. This is visual graphics in the movie being shown. I'm
Don't
not
do
playing
it.
around. I don't play around with content and trigger warnings. Like,
Don't
I'm
read
literally
it.
telling you,
Don't
like,
watch it. Don't.
yeah,
Just don't.
don't put yourself through it, because
Not
like,
even if it's free on YouTube. Just don't. Just do
yeah,
not.
don't. It just how it affected Michelle should be enough to like tell you, and me as well. Like,
Me
I
and this good old friend we became very good friends over the past whole week, because I was just sitting there trying to breathe. So
yeah, like
that
I've
could this
expressed
is
it.
probably enough.
Yeah, I've
And
expressed it to
then
Michelle. Like, how many times I'm like pausing. I'm like, dude,
this
what
was
the
yeah.
fuck?
We watched the ending
What?
together. Yeah.
But she I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the live, but she watched my reaction to like the final
It's
half,
only like 20 minutes of the movie.
and I was just like, what the French toast is going
You
on?
were about to flip a table. Like
I
I don't know
literally
how I
told
felt like
her,
you were just gonna.
I messaged her like, what was it, like 9 or 10 minutes in, and I was like, Michelle, I'm about to flip a table. I'm 9 minutes in and I already hate it here.
It was it was absolutely terrible. Um,
Hey,
why
oh,
don't we talk a little bit about Jackie and like the way that the house was? So, um, it can kind of be like in the book there, and even the movie, there's
I,
a spot in their house that is leaky. And so in the book and in the movie, you just see, like in the movie they show you the general, like how much it leaks through, and that's
mm-hmm,
why Shane steals that little bit of sheet metal so he can protect the roof. And it doesn't show it in the movie, but in the book, it just gets to a point where it gets so rotted out and so rotted down that it breaks through the wall, and there's just like this hole in the ceiling of the roof, and in the kitchen, it just it explodes.
yeah,
Um, but I liked that because it was just a decline in the way that things are between between Jackie and Shane. And also in the movie, it did show a little bit of artistic license with the amount, like what happens during grief. Because in the beginning of the movie, you see the kitchen and it's clean, and Shane is picking up the groceries,
mm,
and everything's kind of going okay. Like everything seems like it's okay. And then the general decline, you just see the kitchen get worse and worse, and you see Jackie like shaking the cereal box because that's all that they feel like eating, even though in the book it's completely different. Like there's a point where he's like, there is nothing to eat in this house. There's no more cereal, there's no more milk.
I
All there was like spaghetti, and
I
he
believe it was like, more specifically, it was an old end piece of salami and then
yeah,
a container of yogurt with pink mold
yeah, it was
going up the
moldy.
side. And I'm
And
like,
there was
oof.
And
Please
there was the
don't.
noodles. I
Yeah, and then
remember
the
there was
noodles.
pasta noodles, but they were like stale and old. And
Yeah.
so it was like you just see the general decline of grief and the way that the mother handles grief because she's sleeping in Destiny's room. She is like touching her things and she occasionally says like stuff when Shane tries to get her to go to bed like she must have been so sad. Why was she so sad? And so you see that part as like a mom. I can't imagine what Jackie must have been going through. Like as you know, as a sibling like Shane and feeling like you have to take care of everybody else.
Yeah.
That is like we even talked about that, Autumn, where when people die in my family, I'm always like the strong one. I'm always
Yeah.
the one that's supposed to be like the beacon. And so I can't show that emotion. I can't like crack. I can't cry. I can't do any of those things. And so to see Shane going through that same thing, that's why I like this a little bit better than I like the movie because of the way that he is portrayed in the movie and the way that people just dump. I feel like everybody just dumped on him.
I mean, let's just be honest. Both in the book, both in the movie, and like those who have reviewed the book have all dumped on him because no one wants to take into account how grief really truly impacts someone and when they're not allowed to express and talk about it. Like I've talked about this with you in private about all the crap in my family. But like going through all the hardships and whatnot, like being the oldest, like so I have four siblings in total, four half siblings. And I'm the oldest out of all of them. And with all the crap that happens within my family and whatnot, I have always been the one to pick up my mom when shit goes wrong. I've been the one to like fill out the bills and the mortgage, or I've been the one to be like, we need to get groceries, goes out, get the groceries. Like, I've never through my entire existence been allowed to openly express, like, I'm just a kid. I shouldn't be at a point where I'm literally becoming the adult and I have to take care of everyone else. And I think that was one of the things I appreciated the most because in the grief and the hardships of everything and Jackie's full decline and Shane getting to that point of where he actually has an outburst and feels like the only way to actually break through is to just start throwing things into the yard, like literally opens up the window and just starts throwing Destiny's things out into the yard. I can relate to that so much because there have been so many times where I've just snapped and felt like I can't keep being the dam and blocking off emotions. And I told you, like when you told me, like that's BS. You shouldn't have to be a beacon. It's okay to show emotions. You don't always have to be strong all the time.
And then there is that scene where he breaks down to David where
Mhm.
he just can't take it anymore. And that is what I liked seeing about the grief is that at some point you can't take it anymore. You can't hold it in anymore. And that's why like if you notice like on Twitter and on Instagram, I was very vocal about how I felt because that's the only place that I could be vocal. Like if
Yeah.
I couldn't be vocal on Facebook. I couldn't be vocal like in between my own family because they know that. Like the entire week I could not cry. It was not until we had my brother's funeral that I finally just broke down because I couldn't hold it in anymore. And so that really relates to the hole in the wall in the book because at some point it couldn't hold itself in anymore and that's why it just splatted. And
Yeah.
then and so um when it comes to the relationship between Jackie and Shane, you also see a moment where Jackie slaps Shane in the face for throwing
Mhm.
those things out the window. And that was something that I also did not like because it's domestic violence. It's domestic abuse where you're abusing your child because your other child's things are out the window. And so you also see that tension between Jackie and Shane because there's a point in the movie where he's like there's nothing to eat anymore. She says there's nothing to eat anymore and he says, "Well then go out and get something." because he's just tired of it at this point. Because
Yeah.
and even his Uncle Pete is dunking on him and being a dick to him, and he straight up asks his mother, like, "Are you gonna say anything?" And she's not. She's not there.
Yeah.
She's not there. And it's not until kind of towards the end that she's like, oh, like she kind of comes out of her depressive episodes, that she kind of like has this moment of clarity where she sees him. She's moving into that next phase of grief where she's like,
Let's be honest, when she starts like waking up and having clarity, it's when Shane and David are getting into the whole trying to get funding so they can go to Toronto. And basically, Jackie goes over. I believe she attempts to call, but she eventually goes over to Evie's place and is like,
my son's not home.
Shane and David have been spending a lot of time together. And then they start having a whole discussion about being two-spirited. And it's not talked about in the movie, but in the book, it shows how families who are raised with like that traditional sense of Native American culture kind of feel about being two-spirited. I know when I came out as being bisexual, my aunts and my uncle Ray ended up like flocking and were like, "Oh, well, you need to go on a date with this Indigenous man and you need to be looking for a suitable husband." Well, being bisexual, what if I don't want a husband? And it was like unfathomable.
Yeah,
Like,
there's some blatant homophobia in
yeah,
certain, even in like POC, because I've heard from a lot of like other cultures where they're like, I can't come out. It's just like
yeah,
someone straight up cannot come out of the closet and be safe and comfortable because of the way that their family will react, the way that like what they're gonna say or what they're gonna do. And so there is some homophobia from Evie, and Evie's like, it's not right. And Becky's like, there was a man that told me that Shane would be two-spirited.
yeah. And I believe, like, even before that scene takes place, I believe it's like the rice picking,
Mm-hmm.
where in the book, like, it's a lot more intense. And I was like, ooh, y'all are undressing each other with your eyes. Like, ooh. And I was really hoping we'd see that in the movie, but we don't. Also, really pissed about the boiler scene, by the way.
Oh
That really
yeah,
pissed me off. Because I
they
love
have
that
sex in
scene.
the boiler room.
That was
That's
like one of my
ceremony.
favorite scenes. I was like, yes, we love to see it, even though it is a boiler room. But there's a scene where they're rice picking, and in the book, Evie has, I believe the discussion is directed to David. And she's like, "You've been spending a lot of time with Shane recently." And he's like, "Yeah, he's my friend. He's my really good friend." And she's like, "That's good. That's good. But two men shouldn't be left alone together. It's too much masculinity." As if that were a problem. And you really see how that impacts Shane and David because they're both in the room. Like in the movie, they're not in the same room, but in the book, they're in the same room. And like they both end up feeling the weight of what she says. In the book, Evie like puts a huge thick layer of pressuring Shane to find a girlfriend for David, someone who's similar to Tara. And it was a lot of cringe for me. I can't speak for Michelle, but like for myself,
Oh
I'm
no, it was full
cringing.
on cringe.
I was just
When
like,
she said that, I was like, this is some
oh,
toxic masculinity bullshit and a
yeah,
total abuse of power, even with almost all the females except for like Jackie, because Jackie is she's not here, you know?
yeah.
But like
She's mentally not here.
abuse of power and the way that they talk and the way that they treat the boys, it's just it was not great. I also wanted to talk about the Berta, the supposed like school counselor. There's this scene where after they find out, yeah, she was a shit show. She just did not give a shit about Shane,
That's
because there's a part where where
oh God.
after we find out about Tara and what happened to her, and somehow Berta knows. I'm like, how the frick does this school counselor know about what happened to this girl? Like, the only way that she would know what had happened to Tara is if it happened like on school grounds, or it happened at school or during school or something like that. Like that would be the only way that she would know. Or if she was like, or if she was married to like a cop on the
Yeah.
reservation. Like,
The other thing, I was speculating this. I've been thinking about this like since I finished the book and the movie. The only other thing that I can piece together, because it's hinted more in the movie than it is the book, that she's kind of like the person who puts together like suicide prevention groups. And so if she were somehow,
because she works at the school too.
yeah, like that would be the only way I could see why she would know, is if she's the one who organizes and oversees all those groups. Because we don't really see it if there's like one for adults, but there is one for a youth. And since Tara was a youth and committed suicide by hanging, like that is the only way. And especially because she was a part of that group, like that is the only way I can understand why she might somehow know that the whole like details of the situation.
Yeah, because
So
they don't discuss like, you know, if they took her to get an autopsy, or
yeah.
you know, who had an autopsy, or like you know, any of the details about the case itself. And like if they had discovered that she'd been sexually assaulted, I really don't know if they would have like shared that part of the information with anybody else
It was
aside from
just
like, the
one
suicide
giant
part.
bomb being dropped. Because one minute they're discussing about Shane being like, I need help to get out of here. And then it's the next, Tara was sexually assaulted before
And
she
she's very
committed suicide.
accusatory towards Shane, where she's like, I don't even want to be in your head right now. That part was just like, wow, you're
Or
supposed to be a school freaking counselor.
or how the fact of she, I don't I don't remember if it was stated on book, but in the movie it's clearly stated that she doesn't care one way or another if Shane was the reason or not that Tara was sexually assaulted. She just needs to know, so she knows how to go about like getting him out and handling things. And that rubbed me the wrong way, because if you know someone who is a sexual assaulter, you should absolutely be using your voice and being like, no, this person needs to be held accountable for their actions. You don't just turn a blind eye. You just don't basically like nod and be like, yeah, I'll do what it takes to cover up your tracks. It's basically hinted that she's willing to cover up whatever the hell he does, whether he's sexually assaulting and raping women or not. And that just blew me out of the water. I'm like, I know they did not think this was a good idea to put in the book and in a movie and have a character be like, oh, yeah, I don't care if you did it or not. I'll cover for you. I just need to know which way the wind's blowing.
And then there's also, we were talking about, let's talk about Ashley for a minute. Ashley is Tara's best friend. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Ashley is going out with Kyle. Kyle is the one that sexually assaults Tara. He's the one that
Womanizes everyone.
He thinks he thinks he's all that in a bag of chips, and he thinks he's hot as hell, even though really he's slimy as fuck. He don't even look that good. He's terrible. He is 1000% terrible, and he's always antagonizing Shane.
Or like how in the book there was like a scene, like the way he lurks. Like when in the book Kyle mentions that he knows about Shane and David, and how he suddenly becomes so meek and small and shrinks back. But in the movie, what was it? Debbie and Kyle both like get really aggressive and they're like ready to beat him. Debbie actually grabs a bat and is literally threatening violence. And I'm like, oh.
She was like, my nephew was with me all night, and anybody that has anything to say about it, you're going to have to go through me. And there's a text from Ashley where Ashley says, die, rapist, asshole, to Shane. And in the movie, she's like, she was my best fucking friend, and she like lunges at him.
And Kyle, okay, so we also need to talk about the fact that in the movie, Kyle is painted as like the next door neighbor type boy.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that you also need to understand. In the book, no, he's a full-on womanizer. In the book, like he's trying to make moves. He's saying like really sexist things towards Tara. He's he is literally making advances in front of his own girlfriend to try and get with Tara. And then of course like in the movie you have the whole scene where the whole sexual assault and the raping and all that takes place, the fact that Tara was intoxicated and whatnot. But like aside from that, in the movie Kyle is painted as like the next door neighbor type guy, very innocent, has the best interest. You don't see the womanizing in the movie. You don't see any of that. You don't see the way he talks to Tara. In fact, they went to a full length of in the movie included someone else to say Kyle's line. That's how far they went to paint Kyle as like the next door neighbor and oh, he couldn't have possibly the one going around womanizing and raping and sexually assaulting these women. And that blew me out of the water because in the book, he is skeezy, he is cringy, he is that person. He is making moves on unavailable women.
Yeah.
And that just like ooh, like when I say I wanted to throw this book out of a window, there are no words to express how badly I wanted to throw the book out the window. And then
Oh,
to see the way they painted him in the movie, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Like, no. I mean, I get what they were trying to do because it's trying to make a point of, well, you never really know with the whole it's like the same thing they make with pedophilia. You never know. It could be your priest. It could be your mom. It could be your next door neighbor. It could be your school teacher. It could be the kid sitting 3 desks behind you. You never know. It could be anyone. I get that they were trying to make that point, but the problem is if you're going to paint someone in one light but then not do it in the book, once again, this is a movie to book adaptation.
it was trash.
Like, you painted this person in that light of, oh, they couldn't possibly be the ones doing it. But then in the book, they're full on skeezy. They're a womanizer. It's on page womanizing.
And
I
so
just,
and then
oh,
not only is Kyle skeezy, but also Debbie is skeezy because
oh, so
she
skeezy.
gets Shane to start trying to deal drugs
Yeah. And then also selling alcohol to underage kids.
on completely underage kids. And then she's got like a bunch of like pictures on her wall of like all
Oh,
the kids in the community or
oh,
people that had died.
oh, okay. So Michelle didn't even know this. And so
Yeah, I was blind.
okay,
I had
okay.
blinders on.
So and I've read reviews. So keep in mind I read reviews like no one talks about this. No one freaking talks about how the fact not only in the movie but on page in the book there are trophies. And what I mean by that, I know in the book community, a lot of y'all watch CSI, Criminal Minds, you watch a lot of FBI type shows and whatnot. And let me tell you from my own experiences, trophies from actual victims is a thing. It is a thing. So when the fact that no one made the connection of the fact that Debbie literally has photos of all the people she's come in contact with that have either fallen victim to Kyle or to something that she was connected to and she has photos of them pinned up on her wall, that's a trophy. Then in the movie, it's not shown in the book and I really wish we would have had it. In the movie, Ashley finds Tara's sweater in Kyle's trailer. That's a trophy. Keeping articles of clothing is a trophy. Those who are whether they're rapists, they're sexual assaultists, they're pedophiles, they're
Murder,
murderers,
shit like that.
sociopaths, however you want to paint it, trophies are a thing. And the fact that no one talks about that, I'm like, y'all just missed like one of the biggest things because this is a legit thing.
There was
This is
also
how you can
something.
incriminate someone.
There was also something in the book that's not talked about the movie, but there is a part where Shane talks about this boy in the past where he had groomed and like molested Shane, that guy Thomas. And he talks about that and how the mom discovered them and like she was like cried her eyes out and
Mm-hmm.
that made no sense to just suddenly bring up in the book because
Yep.
it was not no one said anything about that in the movie.
Yeah.
I was just so that was the part that was kind of like felt very out of pocket. And then like so Shane, he's not sure what to do because there's no money. In order to make money, you have to do some kind of thing. You have to have a job or you deal drugs. And Kyle is like, hey, my aunt wants you to go see her. And so he goes to see her. She's like, oh, you're going to be dealing drugs for me now since you need money. And he's like, whatever. Okay, fine. And David does not like that, does not want him to do that. And he's like, well, you don't want to like be out in public. So like, how do you have an opinion on it? And he's like, I gotta do something because I want to get the fuck out of here. And then so no one's buying from him because everybody thinks that he's a predator. And he tries to tell Debbie this, and Debbie's like, no, well, I guess you're gonna have to pay me back for all this. And he's like, I don't know how the hell that works. So him and David come up with this harebrained idea that they're going to somehow poison Debbie and then
Drug her.
yeah, they're gonna drug her so that she passes out or whatever to get the money that's in the safe. And there's also a gun in the safe. Either they brought a gun or there was a gun
Yeah.
involved.
So in the movie, there was a gun in the safe, and then in the book, Debbie has the gun stashed somewhere, and somehow one of them, I can't remember, it's either Shane or Debbie, ends up getting a hold of it. There's a scuffle. In the book, Kyle actually gets injured from the shot that's fired. In the actual movie, Shane and Debbie are scuffling, and the shot is just like fired through the roof.
Yeah, that annoyed me so much because like, man, so Kyle doesn't get shot, and then immediately after, David and they got a bill in the book, but in the movie they don't. But like they run off, and you hear sirens going off. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
how were they supposed to know what the hell was going on? Like they made it seem like no one's around, no one. The police don't pay attention to that because in the thing they were like in the book they're like, oh well, they just get away with it because nobody can prove what is going on in the place there. And then so yeah, Kyle doesn't get shot in the movie, but he gets shot in the book. And then there's like a whole article about how they were arrested. And
Yeah.
and then David and Shane spend the night together. And there's a part where I think it was David that wants to go out the window. And he's like, if you go out the window, you can't come back. I think Shane says that, where he's like,
Yeah.
you go out the window, there's no coming back, we're over, you can't.
Yeah.
Like he
Because
kind of
at that
a
point,
little bit of an ultimatum.
Shane's just done. One of the things, like in the book, like, so the reason why in the book you hear sirens is because there's like an explosion. It's not the gunshot. You hear like, there's like some like full blown explosion or something that happens in the book. And then in the movie, like, it's
I think it was
crickets.
because they had a lab, I
Yeah.
think. And so like
It's,
it explodes.
yeah, it's literally fucking crickets in the movie. You literally get crickets. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So we're really,
And then
okay.
there's a part where in the book, in the aftermath of that, and they show part of it in the movie where, so after this explosion happens or the gun thing happens, they're running and they end up at the lake where
Mm-hmm.
Shane runs into the lake, and he's talking about how he can't handle this anymore and he can't do it anymore because they didn't get away with any money, they didn't get away with anything. And so he places the gun to his temple, and he's gonna do it, and him and David get into a scuffle because David's trying to stop him. Versus it, not gonna lie, it was a little comedic because in the movie it just looks like David's trying to drown Shane. Like,
Yeah. Like, that was, like, one of the things I pointed out. Like, while you were watching my reaction, I was like, is Shane really gonna blow his brains out? I was, like, going there for a minute. I was like, "Oh, no. Okay. Okay. So this is a good point." Like, how if it's one thing after another, because I reached that point in my life. I reached a point where I just couldn't take any more bad things happening and just carrying all that weight, and I wanted it to be over. And to see that in the movie, I was like, "Oh my god, this is happening. I've been through this. Like, I know how this scene feels." And then for David to just like charge in,
I'm
and
just
then it goes a complete different turn, and they pan out from like the scuffle to where all you see is David and like water splashing around. I'm like, "Oh my god, is he trying to kill his boyfriend? Like,
I remember
what
you were
is
laughing. I was like, oh
is
god.
he like trying to drown him? Did David just suddenly decide, you know what, I'm gonna do it for you? I was so confused. I'm like, I don't remember this being in the book.
And then they let the gun
What?
go, so the gun goes into the water, and then they leave it behind, and then they spend the night together, and then that's when in the morning when Jackie, or not Jackie, when Evie like knocks on the door and is like, "Oh, David, is Shane in there with you?" And then Shane's like,
I
can't do this
believe
anymore.
at that point they were at Shane's house.
Yeah.
And they were in the kitchen making breakfast, and they were like, "Shh, shh, no, let them be. Let them come out on their own." Which I thought that was freaking like, really? You're gonna have a coming out scene? Like, I don't remember if it was like actually depicted that way in the book, but in the movie, so Evie and Jackie are huddled over the stove. They're making breakfast, and Evie's like, "We should go wake them up." And Jackie's like, "No, no, let them come out on their own." And I was like, "Oh my god, is this gonna be like a coming out of the closet?" Like, no. I remember cringing so hard at that. I was like, "Oh, you did not just say that. No."
Oh
And
yeah.
so they
Okay.
end up
So
coming
in the
out
book,
holding hands.
a pot clangs in the kitchen. David shifts under the covers next to Shane, pulled up towards the surface of his dreams by the sound. After a moment, he lets out a sigh and sinks back down. Shane steps out of bed and puts his ear to the door. He can hear something sizzling in a pan. The house had been empty when he and David arrived home, but his mom and Evie must have come back while they slept. How long are we going to let them stay in there? He hears Evie ask. They need to rest, Jackie says. Are they in the same bed? Jackie shushes Evie. Shane imagines his mom puttering around the kitchen like she used to. They're too young. They don't know what they're doing, Evie mutters. They're home. That's all that matters.
Yeah, much cringe.
And they do eventually come out, because after that he's just like, no, we have to actually. So they come out of the bedroom, and in the movie, Shane is holding David's hand.
Yeah.
Like, he's just like, no, this is my house. We're coming out. And
Hmm.
which was good but bad at the same time, because it's like,
Stereotypical coming out of the closet, except the closet is the bedroom. And I'm like,
this
ah,
is not consistent.
no.
But I love the fact that Jackie was 1000% okay with it. She didn't
Yeah.
yell or anything. She didn't get mad at them. Evie is the only one that has a problem,
And
which
I'm
is
so
crazy
freaking
because
bitter because even though she's not happy about it, like, she doesn't get any lines in the movie. Like, and the only thing we get in the book is like, "I heard scrambled eggs, so everyone's getting scrambled eggs." And I'm like, yes, you don't have to like it, you don't have to accept it, but the fact that you're still willing to come to the breakfast table and be with them, like, that's something. That shows that it is possible to still care about someone, even though they don't meet with like your morals or the way you view things or anything, you can still love them, you can still care about them, you can still support them and still be around them despite that conflict. And that's what I really loved about that ending scene. It's because one, Jackie's getting everything together. Jackie realizes it's time to start moving on. And I love that. I love that we see that. And I loved how in the movie it depicts a big bonfire. I love that. I love seeing that instead of packing it all away, instead of just giving it to strangers, I know a lot of people would frown upon burning it, like burning all of Destiny's things, but I
In my
really love
culture, they
that.
burn it. Like in my families, they burn things. They don't keep it. They consider that to be like you're not complete. Like the spirit is not
Yeah,
complete without burning the things because if you're handing them off to like strangers, that's part of their spirit. And so you're handing
yeah,
off part of their spirit to somebody else and we just don't think that's right. So a lot of the times we burn things whereas like white people will just like give it to Goodwill. With
yeah,
us, we just can't. We don't do that.
yeah. I know for myself, like, I mean, I can't speak for the rest of my family,
Yeah,
but
I can't speak for the rest of natives either.
I keep from those who have passed away, those who have been like really close to me and important to me, I've kept one or two things of them. And then of course, I've talked about this a few times, but like I have three tattoos on my body that have like deep meanings for people that I've lost in my life. And that's kind of my way of reminding myself that how important they were. But I don't keep like all their things. I keep like one or two things and then that's it. And if people like, "Oh, well here take this." I'm like, "No. I have these things and that's all I want. That's all I need."
Yeah,
That's just to keep a little bit of them outside of photos. And then the rest, I personally support the burning. Like I don't like to see other things that once belonged to people I cared about handed off to like other people. And to me, it just seems pointless to pack it all away. It just feels like you're caging what that person's life was. And I don't like that. I fully support more of the burning style. And I believe like on my dad's side, we do the burning. I believe like on my dad's side, we do like the burning and stuff. But
yeah. And we even did that for my papa, and my papa was white, but my aunt
mhm,
was like, one of my aunts, that's his sister, was like, oh, well, you should just give him to Goodwill. And my mom, she just put her foot down. She was like, no, we're burning
yeah,
his things because he would not, he went through with whatever my mom believed. And so he was like, this is what he thought of it. And so this is what we're going to do. And that's that. And
yeah,
so you see at the end, Evie, she's doing this sage. She sages Evie's, or not Evie, but she sages the room and they burn everything in the end. And
yeah,
I really appreciated that. And you see it is, and then Evie finally, through this whole thing, just sucks it up and gives the two like her
mhm,
blessing. She puts their hands together. She kisses both of them on the forehead, and so you finally get that resolution of like we're your family, we're here, we protect you, we love you,
yeah,
instead of like this broken relationship
yeah.
between David and his grandma.
I think out of everything, that was like my favorite part. I also think I don't think we've touched on this at all. Destiny is how in the book, like Shane is like seeing Destiny's spirit, seeing her essence throughout like parts of the home. And I think like that's one thing like about grief and losing someone no one ever talks about. Like how in those first like even after some time, like in the thick of the grief, like you could be doing something and you could just like remember something, or you could hear their voice and like when you look over, you're remembering something. I really love that. And I wish in the movie we had seen it more. We get one scene where Shane is helping his mom, helping Jackie color her hair. And in the book, it's just stated that Destiny like shows up. She's just there. But in the movie, I think we both ended up really like loving this scene. Destiny is helping Shane rinse out the dye from Jackie's hair. And I really love that because I think it shows how in the thick of grief you can still keep remembering someone, keep seeing them, keep feeling like they're still there with you. And I really love that. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, I did too. I loved that scene. However, I did feel like the movie went way too fast. Like at times it
Yeah.
felt way too fast with the dialogue or like it's like sentence where like when you're in class like in a like English class and you guys are doing like a reading of like Othello or some shit where you're just saying the line and then passing it on to the next person. That's how it felt. It didn't actually feel like you were in the moment, you were in the dialogue. It just felt like it was like a screen reading, but like within a scene. It just didn't feel
Yeah.
cohesive. And there were a lot of holes and plot holes and things in the moment. So like you see the movie and then you read the book and it's like night and day, completely different.
Huge gaps of detail missing. Like the movie, like it's exactly as Michelle said, night and day. Like you read the book and it's like I think we both enjoyed the book more than the movie because the
Oh,
movie
absolutely.
just huge gaps of information is gone, huge amounts of detail is gone, and like you can have a film like the way this was done, but still have those details, still have enough details or information to like actually have a cohesive story and details and not having like people watching be like okay.
Yeah, which I was really disappointed because this was like the end company, like the company that, has like the movie out is Wolf. And Wolf,
Hmm.
like I said, Wolf has a lot of movies that are LGBTQIAP and this just yes, you have the male romance, but it just does not feel like
You
Adam Garner Jones's vision, like what he had thought, like execution versus like thoughts, like expectations versus reality was completely different. Like me personally, when I finished this, I straight up said on Facebook, I was like, I could have done a like 10 times better job at this than freaking Adam Jones. Like I remember even telling Autumn, I was like, if I had enough money for a fancy camera and a couple of people around for like B-roll, I could have done a way better job as just like your average know nothing film student rather than a apparently established film guy
mm,
that put this abomination together. And like, yeah, the casting was great. And there was only like three people that weren't part of the main plot line. But it was just like, I feel like he really wasted his money. And it's crazy because he won three award, okay, winner of Audience Choice Award, Imagine Native Film Media Arts Festival, winner of Best Feature Narrative Reel Out Queer Film Plus Video Festival, and then the winner of Audience's Choice and Jury Prize Best Canadian Film Queer North Film Festival. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? So you're an award winner, and this is the best that you could put out.
yeah.
I'm sorry, it just makes me
It
angry.
oh, it's a huge oof, guys.
It was a
It's
disappointment.
it's everyone, it's a huge oof. Like between all the content trigger warnings to like the way the movie is and then the book, like, oh, okay. One thing I also didn't talk about, and that was like a really big oof, and I think I mentioned this to you, Michelle. Um, I think I was like 25% into the book, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for someone to do a public outing. I was literally waiting. You get this sense of dread and looming of
Every
even in
time
the
they think
movie.
that they're gonna see, like somebody's gonna see them,
Yeah.
and the
Even
way that Tara finds out,
oh my
shitty,
god. E-
shitty.
Even in the movie, like there's just a huge sense of dread of like a public outing waiting to happen. And like I hate comparing like books and movies to like other books and movies, but like Simon versus the Homo sapien gender, like while it's not good, like the sense you feel from that, like, oh no, this is really happening. Please no. Like in book and movie, that's the same feeling you get with the book and the movie for
Because you feel
Firestone.
like they're gonna be outed at any point
It's like, oh
as
no.
well.
Like it literally feels like around any corner there's gonna be someone be like saying something homophobic, something be like, and then when Kyle in the book actually confronts Shane and says something about it, like actually says,
Oh,
addresses how Shane is having intimate relationships
we
with
forgot to talk
David.
about that too. We forgot to talk about the beginning of Shane and David. Like in the movie, they're established, but in the book, David and Shane, like, so Shane had always heard that David was gay, and David straight up like says like, "Oh yeah, the couch is like too small for me." Ha 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 ha. And Shane's like, I'm naked under here, and David's like, "That's okay." And that's how they like get started.
The fact that how David was Destiny's best friend and that he would come over to stay the night with Destiny to sleep on the floor, she would sleep in her bed, and he would literally, on the first time that they like figured out, well, I'm pretty sure David's already established in his sexuality, but Shane, with Shane specifically, it took Shane's sexual awakening for his sexuality for the first night for him to really question it. Was David comes in to his room after Destiny fell asleep, and it's specified, like it is very specific in book, they wait till midnight or past where everyone's asleep, and David comes in and he's like, "Can I sleep in here? The couch is too small for me." Starts taking everything off, and Shane's like, I'm naked." And David's like, "Okay." And then David climbs into the bed with a boner, full
Oh
blown
yeah,
on
the
boner,
boner.
full blown, full log to the breeze.
Forgot about the boner.
And instead of facing away from Shane like any person would do, they end up facing each other. And that's how it all takes off. It takes David climbing into Shane's bed with a full hard on and them having like, I guess, full blown eye contact
Face
for
to face, but not touching.
face to face, not touching, basically a staring contest to spark them going at it. And I'm like, this is Shane's sexual awakening. Some questionable sneaking around.
It was like page 48 when they're like, "Oh yeah, this is how they got started." I
I'm
was like,
like,
"What?"
that's a
Okay.
whole can of worms to unbox
And the
right
only
there.
thing that I thought that was like remotely nice, because they don't really they talk about it more in book, but not in the movie. But David makes a kind of like like a little shrine where he takes a like a 2 liter Coke bottle, he cuts it open, he puts some things in there, and he puts a candle in there with her obituary photo thing, and then he like floats it out on the water. And that scene was very touching.
I
And
think,
that's it. That's all they talk about, the way that David and Destiny were friends, but they don't delve into like how much of like how close they were. They just know that they were best friends. They didn't say like, so there's a little bit of guilt on that because they were together when Destiny killed herself.
or okay, I don't even think we talked about this. How when Tara commits suicide, how not only in the book but also in the movie, it's heavily emphasized as this is punishment for Shane and David being together, for them being two-spirited, for them having a relationship, any intimate relationships. And I was like, you want to bring a religious aspect into it.
Because this is the way that's the way
I'm
that
like,
Tara found out, is that she saw them
oh,
kissing.
I was like, oof, this, ooh, this is a choice. And I'm
Point of
like,
view.
if they didn't have problems already to insert that element of a way of Tara's dead because they were together. It's their fault because they're in a relationship together. She's dead because they choose to love men instead of women. And that just like, oh my God. When
Yeah, I
I
remember
say
being
I
like, "Are
wanted to
we
throw
reading
this
the same book?"
book, when I say I want to throw this book, I'm pretty sure Michelle was like ready to be like, I'm about to throw this book at your head.
Seriously, because I was like, I want my fucking money back. What the fuck am I reading? What the fuck is this? And when I watched this, it was even worse. When I watched
Oh,
this, I was like, what the fuck is this?
a hot
So
mess.
it
That's
was
the
a hot
term.
mess. So what are we reading slash watching next month?
So next month for August, because both June and July were just
Trash
we
heaps?
have regrets. We have regrets. We're gonna say that. We have regrets. We decided to go with a movie, and this is one of Michelle's favorites. I have not seen this yet, so this is gonna be a whole experience for me, but we're gonna be watching Thunderheart. I believe Graham Greene's in that, right?
Yes, Graham Greene and Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer is like he's not native, but um so this movie is about, and it kind of reflects on the American Indian movement, and it talks. So what happens is that there is a murder on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, which, if you didn't know, I am Oglala Lakota. My family lives in Pine Ridge. I have family in at Standing Rock. I'm a member of Standing Rock Reservation, but I, have family in Pine Ridge, and so there's a murder on Pine Ridge, and it has ties to this movement called ARM. I can't remember what it's exactly called, but it's another Native American movement, and it's like traditionalists versus urban natives, and how like during in the 70s 80s there was more of like a inter-race war between the two natives, and it touches on that. And so they have to go down to this man. He's in Washington D.C. He just wants to get like a promotion or something like that, and this is Val Kilmer's like, he is a white passing native. I think they say that he's Hunkpapa or he's Anishinaabe. I can't remember which part tribe or native or what exactly he is, or he might be Minnekoju. I can't remember, but we just know that he is also supposedly Lakota. And so he goes down from DC to Pine Ridge to help figure out what the hell's going on, because they only have like, I think it was like 48 hours or 72 hours or something like that. And they only have a certain amount of time to solve this murder, get up, move on. And once he gets down there, it's a whole different thing, because in his file, he has native and like native roots. So his father is half, I think he was a native man or half native or something like that. And so he goes down there and he meets Graham Greene's character, who is Officer Walter Crowhorse. And it's just this adventure of finding out who the killer is, finding out what exactly happened on the reservation, and the corruption and the things that happened between FBI, BIA, and like the things that they cover up. I personally love it. I think it's a good movie. Some of the stuff obviously doesn't hold up now because it was filmed in like 92, 90, 91, something like that. But it's always been one of my favorites because there's a couple of characters that I personally really like. So if you want to watch, I'm pretty sure you can watch it on YouTube. Otherwise, yeah.
I'm excited. I haven't seen it. I'm Apache, but hearing that there might be white passing Native American, I'm all about it because for those who don't know, I am very much white passing. I am half Apache on my dad's side and then half German, Pennsylvania Dutch on my mother's side. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see that because I haven't really read about that in books. I haven't really seen that in movies. For those who also don't know, I grew up with the old cringy Southwestern movies and war movies.
Oh,
Yeah.
and the late John Trudell is in that movie as well. He was a Native American. He was a Indian poet, Native poet, and then also there is another Native man that's in that movie. I think he's related to somebody's related. Someone that I knew, but that was related to him. But like, that's the thing with like natives and like native actors. There's some people that are like actually closely related to people, but we don't know that. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I know someone in our group is related to someone very famous. I won't say who, but um, that was something that I found out. So like, you see people, and then but just know like in native communities we're like, oh, that's actually my, that's my uncle, or that's my cousin, or like we're distantly related. So, but that's good. We need native representation, and we need native representation in movies and film and TV shows, things like that.
Yeah. So, as usual, this will be taking place on the last Sunday of every month. So, this will be on, oh, August
August 30th.
30th. It will be same time like we've been doing. I've talked about this with Michelle. I think you agree, Michelle. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but keeping it kind of consistent with like time 7 p.m. CST and then 8 p.m. EST. For those of you who are international,
Then
I
you'll have more
apologize.
information on our Twitter, and then there's some links down below that you can click on, like donating to the Black Kills legal fund. Because if we're going to be watching a movie about Lakota people, we should be, making the conscious
Yep.
decision to do that too. And then also, I think, do you have a link to the Quiet
I
Tribe
I
thing?
do. Just because I know there's going to be people who watch this, and let's be honest, was it? It's August 4th. Midnight Sun comes out. I know there's going to be people who are going to be buying it. Look, if you're going to do that, I have links down below. There is one where you can specifically donate to the Quileute tribe. They are currently trying to get themselves relocated.
To
I
higher
believe they're
ground.
trying to start with their schools first to preserve their schools. So there is a way to donate to help them and support that whole move because that is tedious. It is a
And
very
it's really
tedious task.
important. It's very important because in Stony Rock, my little community is called Kennel, and there used to be an old kennel like way down by the river, but then it got flooded out, so they had to move to higher ground. And so that is very important because it's threatening the livelihood, and if you want to care about Indigenous issues, you have to care about the people too. And we just want them to be safe and hopefully raise some money so they can get to higher ground, and then the
I
Boston People Fund. And
Yeah.
if
I'm
you're gonna be
also Go ahead.
if you're gonna be reading Midnight Sun, like I have to read Midnight Sun for a video, so if you're gonna be doing that, please donate to the things. Okay, donate to the things.
I'm also gonna make a statement because I am not Navajo, but the Navajo are considered cousins to the Apache. And for those who have not been paying close attention, the crisis on the Navajo reservations with COVID and everything is so bad. They have had to put severe lockdowns on the reservation. They one, let's just be honest, they don't have good water supply. They do not have supplies to get the necessary means for like groceries and things, but they do not have like a supply to get masks. So there are a bunch of links down below how you can help support Navajo families. There should be one for families who have suffered losses because of COVID. Um, I believe they are the reservation with the highest body count right now because of COVID. So please help support them. I am not Navajo, but to help show support to my fellow Plains tribes, please, 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 please go donate to them because I know they could really use it. I think there's also a link down there where you can help donate specific money towards specific, like where the money goes to, whether it's like masks or like bottled water, stuff like that. So just please donate to them. Like I've already donated. I don't post it publicly because of multitude of reasons, but please, please go support. Please go support them because that's one of the things that's been plaguing me for a while. I do
And
have
me as
a few
well.
friends who live on the Navajo reservation. So just support any way you can, no matter what the tribe. Please support the Black Hills protests and whatnot and help get those people out of all that jazz, whether they've been put in detainment or anything like that. So just do your part to show your support for First Nation people. We don't talk about it a lot in the book community, and my voice is only so loud. I can't speak for everyone else who's Indigenous in the book community. I can only speak for myself. Um, but it really makes a difference, and we don't talk about it enough. And when you guys actually start talking about, like, hey, pay attention to this,
It
like
just warms my heart because
it
to see people ignore it, it hurts. It hurts so bad.
it it makes so much a difference. Like, let's just be honest. We feel like we're one of the most ignored voices in the book community, and we're definitely a smaller voice. We can be as loud as we want, but we definitely get overlooked. So please, please just go support in any way that you can. It means so much. Like words can't even express it. So yeah. Any final words, Michelle?
You kind of just said it all there.
Me rambling for like 5 minutes straight
It's
of like, go.
totally okay. I'm really excited about our movie night.
Same.
It's one of my favorite movies, and like ever since I was like small child, and my mom, that was the only rated R movie that my mother would let me watch because it included like my literal people, and so
Mhm.
like it just makes me happy and proud, and like Graham Greene, I also like had a super big crush on him at that time because
We love Graham Greene.
the whole like his hair and his locks, like
Young Graham Greene is a hell of a man.
like y'all like okay, so like young Graham Greene, the way that y'all crush on him is like the way that I crush on him is like how y'all feel about young Jeff Goldblum in like
Oh,
Jurassic
okay,
Park.
okay, okay. Let me just open this can of worms. As a Jeff Goldblum is daddy. I'm putting that out there, so it's out there
He likes
now.
being called Zaddy actually.
Like he's daddy. Like he's daddy, no matter what age. Like I'm just saying, I'm putting that out there. This went off on a whole other tangent. I'm so sorry for those of you at home watching. Y'all are
Somebody
like,
putting their
she's
hands over
crazy.
their kids' ears, like, oh my god.
They were like, Autumn, just like grab this by the hands and then like, woo, full frat party girl. Woo, let's get wasted.
Okay, I think that wraps it up from here. Thank you for joining us so much. This was amazing.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all
for
so
being here with me,
much.
Autumn. This is amazing. I'm
I
so glad
mean,
we have this little piece on BookTube to talk about Native things because, like you said, there's just not enough. We need it. We all need it. Good
Okay, so
time.
she's like doing a total discredit to herself. So she's the one who approached me about all this, and she's like the real mastermind be all behind the oh my god, she's indigenous. So like if y'all aren't following her and supporting her and her content, she's on Twitter, she's on YouTube, she's on Instagram. I'm pretty sure I have all of her information linked down below where you can find her. I don't think I have your blog linked down. I don't think you opened your blog up. Maybe you did. I think
I
you had
have
it
a
unlocked.
blog. I just am not good at updating it. It needs to be updated. I haven't updated since like February. Okay, it's a real tragedy.
But she's the real mastermind. She messaged me about wanting to do this. So this wouldn't be possible without her. So go support her. So yeah. And with that, I'm gonna conclude the live. So we'll see you all in August on the 30th at 7 p.m. CST, 8 p.m. EST, talking about Thunderheart. Go watch it. I think isn't it on Amazon?
You know what? We're just gonna Google it real quick because
I
usually if you Google it, it will tell you where exactly you can like watch it, which I
I
love. Like, thank you, Google.
I'm pretty
So
sure you
yeah,
can
it's
rent
on
it on
Amazon
Amazon.
Prime. I'm probably just gonna have to buy it on DVD. Oh, it's on Vudu for $2.99, YouTube for $3.99, and Sling TV with subscription. I don't know what Sling TV is, but
Me either. But there you
I'm
go.
definitely gonna be watching it via Vudu.
There's a wide plethora of where you can find the movie and watch it with us. I will probably be talking with Michelle and coordinating like how we want to do it if we want to watch it together so she can see like my first reactions and whatnot. So I hope you all have a good night. I hope you all stay safe. We love you so so much and thank you all for coming out to support us. We mean it. It means so much to us. Like we really appreciate it. Like and Michelle's one of my best friends. So please support her as well. And just, I hope you all continue to stay safe and show support for our little community. And we'll catch you in August. So, bye.
Bye bye.